So I guess the first thing we wanted to do was when we gave the presentation at Max, we kind of just jumped in and showed really quickly how to get started with the map. We didn't show how to install, where to get it. So I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit and show kind of how you get it, where it is, and a few things like that, and see if anyone has had success getting it installed and if anyone has used it. So Adobe has a marketplace that they call Adobe Add-ons, which I'm assuming you may or may not be familiar with. And you can see it here. I've got it loaded up here in Chrome. And probably the easiest way to find us, there's a couple ways to find the extension. For example, we're a featured app up here on the top. So for example, if you go to add all add-ons, you kind of scroll through the top. We are right here. If you search for Illustrator, we're one of the top ones in Illustrator. We're also in Photoshop. The other way you can find us is if you just do a search. For example, over here in the box, you just type in, for example, map or maps or ArcGIS or Esri or anything like that. You should be able to find us. And there we are there. So once you do that, you can click on here. And obviously to get in, you can see here up here in the corner, I've logged in with my Creative Cloud account, so you have to be logged in to the Adobe Add-ons store to access this information. And if you click on the add-on, I've already installed it, but if you haven't installed it, you see this box here, and you'll see this little green checkbox acquired. So in this case, I've logged in. The Adobe Add-ons Marketplace knows my Creative Cloud account. It knows me. It knows what applications, extensions I have installed, so it knows I've already installed it. If you haven't installed it, this button here that I'm hovering over now, that'll say free. And essentially what happens is if you click it, it will install it. And if you have the Creative Cloud desktop app, depending on your bandwidth, it can take anywhere from a minute or up to 5 minutes to maybe install. But how you can confirm it's installed after is if you have the Creative Cloud desktop app. I'm running on a Mac, but it's probably very similar on a PC as well. If you go to the Creative Cloud app and you go to your home, Adobe has this thing that they call the activity stream. And you can go, essentially it keeps track of all the applications and installs and things that you've done with the Creative Cloud application, so you can kind of see mine here. And if you scroll up, an example here, we did an update a couple days ago, and you'll see that it uninstalled and reinstalled. And this happens all automatically for you behind the scenes. So you can check to make sure it's installed. You can kind of confirm by checking your activity stream. Again, that's on the Creative Cloud desktop app, and you can click home, and then again, it'll show you, for example, you have installed the ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud add-on. So that's one way of verifying that you've installed it successfully. I'm just curious, has anyone, you can just give me a yes or a no in terms of in the chat window, has anyone successfully installed and is using it as of right now? We have had a few issues in the past. Cool, good. So we have had some feedback. Adobe has some documentation about this thing they call the extension manager, but that's actually a older technology that Adobe is deprecating. So if you actually try to use that, if you kind of dig down into some of the documentation here that's provided by Adobe, it tells you to use the extension manager to install it. That's not what you should do. So just for future reference, it sounds like most people have installed it, haven't tried to use it, or again, they're working through IT issues. But all you really need to do is just click on that button, and it should install it for you automatically. The other thing you do is after you see this kind of note in your activity stream that the extension's been installed, if you have Illustrator or Photoshop open at the time, you'll have to close Illustrator or Photoshop and reopen it for those applications to see and register the application. So again, we've seen things where someone has Illustrator open, they go to the add-ons page, they install it, and it doesn't show up immediately. Essentially, you just have to close Illustrator or Photoshop and reopen it, and it should be visible. Okay, cool. So once you've got it installed, it sounds like most people have installed it successfully. And let me just close Chrome here. Again, I want to jump into this. So I've already got Illustrator started. So once again, it's installed. How you access it, just really quickly is you go Windows, oops, sorry, that's Chrome, go Windows, and again, the same is true for Photoshop, and again, something very similar on a PC. You go down to extensions, and again, you'll see maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. So let me just kick that off. So the first thing you'll do is when you install it, you'll get a dialog that looks something like this. You might also have a splash screen that prompts you to log in immediately. Either way, what you can do is it tells you to start. You can click here, or you can click here, and it says start making maps. So you click here, and it'll open up a login screen. Let me bring that over here to my other monitor. And again, we didn't talk much about this during Mac's presentation, but I wanted to go through this in a little more detail. With this 1.1 release, which is what we were really promoting and talking about at Max, is we have this complementary access to the extension. And again, if you haven't used it yet, how this works is if you pick complementary, and I'll just click go here, I won't go through the whole process, but essentially we'll give you free access to the application. All you need to do is provide your first name, your last name, and your email address as it says here. And then when you click sign up, what we'll do is we'll send a authorization code to the email address that you've specified. And in that email, you'll get I think it's a 21 alphanumeric code. You can copy and paste that code down into here, into this authorization code box, and you click activate, and then you're in using the application for free. It's completely free. There's no timeout. There is some limited functionality. You don't get access to everything in the extension, but you pretty much get access to most of the major pieces of functionality. As I go through the demos here today, I'll highlight where there's a distinction between the free access and then the paid access. Let me just cancel out of this. What I'm going to do for today is I'm actually going to go in through my paid account, and that's what we call an ArcGIS Online account. So I'm going to sign in with that. So I've already signed in now, and what I want to do is I want to go through a couple little workflows. The first thing you'll notice is you'll get a window that looks like this is a map. You can navigate the map as you would most mapping applications. You can kind of pan, zoom, so you can kind of interactively find where you want to make a map. The other thing that you can do is you can actually type in a name of a location if you're looking for a specific area or a specific address you want to map. So how you do that is there's this little search button here. It's got like a little pin. If you click on that, you can type in a location name. So I'm going to make a map over northern Phoenix in this example here. So the map zooms into that location, and if I click cancel here, you can see the location here. You can zoom out a little bit and know where you are. You can also change the what we call a base map. So in this case here, the map that you're looking at for reference is this kind of a dark gray. It kind of mimics the Adobe Illustrator interface. You can change that if you wish to. So there's this base map selector here. So for example, if you want to have a different, you're looking for a particular feature and you can't find it on this map, maybe you could try a different map. We have an image map you could look at, for example, to get that reference. We've got other types of maps. So again, if that helps you find and kind of navigate yourself, you can do that. I'm going to switch back to the gray in this case, but just wanted to show you that feature as well, if it just helps you navigate where you are if you're looking for a particular map extent and you want to zoom in on that. So once you have that, you can then define what we call a map board, which is really just a map extent, which equates to the size of the Illustrator document or artboard once the map is downloaded. So there's a couple of options here. Up here at the top, you've got these two buttons. You can copy an existing map, or you can essentially manually create and edit a map. And that's what I'm going to do in this case. I'm going to click this button. Now, when I do this, there's a couple things I want you to note. The navigation, the search, and the zoom in, the zoom out, and all that, that is currently enabled. But once you go into start more or less edit mode, defining your map extent, you'll notice that those buttons go away. So you're kind of locked in to the current map extent. So in this case here, I'm going to draw a box over the area that I want. And what I want to do here is I can give my map a name. So I'm just going to take the default name at this point. What I can do here now is I want to define the output. So normally what happens is, you know, from any graphic presentation point of view, really the media size, whether that's you know, an image, a PNG, a JPEG, or maybe something for print, a PDF, or maybe it's going to go into a PowerPoint. The size of the output media really dictates how much area that you want to cover on your map. So that's really what I want to do in this case. So here I'm going to define the artboard size, and that's literally the size of the document, the artboard in Illustrator. So in this case, I want to make it 17 inches. I can type in INPX, all the kind of the abbreviations that Illustrator use. So if I want to work in pixels, that's currently what my document is set to, my settings in Illustrator. But I can override that by just typing in the unit suffix, which I prefer, and it'll convert it back for you. So I can just do that, 17 by 12 inches. I can do that, it'll convert it back, and that's simply all I need to do. And so it will draw a box based on those dimensions that you've defined. And again, you're still in edit mode here, so you can kind of pick this box up. Obviously, you can move it around. You've got selection handles over here. So as soon as you hover over those selection handles, you'll notice the size of the artboard that's going to be represented when you download this map. If you take these and move these now, those will actually change the artboard size on download. So kind of be aware of that. If you do start stretching this, you're stretching the output size. So just be aware of that as well. You can again position this. So I wanted to highlight a couple other things in here. Again, we're in kind of edit mode at this point. And again, you can tell that because the navigation buttons are gone away. And again, you can see this dashed line with the selection handles around the extent of my map. You can get out of edit mode at any point. There's two ways to do that. Again, you can go back here. This is kind of a toggle, so you can toggle that off over here. And once you do that, again, you'll notice that the selection handles go away and my navigation buttons return. So I can kind of go back up here. I can go to a different location if I choose to do that. One thing I wanted to note is now that you've got a map extent drawn, I wanted to highlight a couple of the other buttons up here. You have this kind of control here that lists the maps that you have in your current session. I can, for example, if I've zoomed away from this map and I want to easily get back, all I can do is just click on this and it'll zoom me back to that map extent. You can also have more than one map extent in the current session. So if I happen to have more than one map, I could also click on this and I would get a list of maps. So you can kind of think of it almost like a little bit of a bookmark for your map extents. So that's an easy way to kind of get back to where you were before. The other thing you can do is I'm going to highlight this button over here as well. So at any point, you can again access the dimensions, the map extent, the page size, the scale of this map at any point. And you can do that through here. And once you click on this, it goes back to the mapboard option. So for example, I can change some of these properties. In this case, I want to change the title of my map. And again, this title is the title of the Illustrator document that will come down once we download it. So we can do something like that. And again, it gets reflected over here as well. The other thing I wanted to note is we've got, again, some buttons along the top. You can delete your map here, your sign in, you have your help system up here. So again, just some of those buttons. Some of the major buttons are also listed here as well. So I'll talk about the preview and add content, or what we call the compilation window, in a second. Again, this button here, this is the edit mode. It's the same as this button up here. So you can kind of use either to enable or disable editing of your map extent. So you can do it that way. This button here is the same as this one here, again, which allows you to modify or view your map properties. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there's a couple little buttons down here. There's a decrease map area and an increase map area. So this is really useful if you kind of want to fine tune your map extent. So you can just kind of incrementally make small changes on your map extent. You're not changing your page size, but you're changing the amount of detail in your map. So the best way to see that is, let me open up what we call the compilation window. So again, this extent here, this is just your map extent. It's not the final map that you're actually going to download. It's really just an extent indicator. And so if you want to actually view the map and what you see, what you get kind of experience, you click the add and preview and add content button. It's the one with the eyeball. So for example, if I open up this, that will open up a second window. And that's what we call our compilation window. And normally what I like to do, especially back here in the office, if I have a larger monitor or maybe multiple monitors, I like to have both of them up at the same time and have them side by side a little bit. And I like to stretch this one up a little bit bigger so you can kind of see the details a little bit more. And what you can do inside of this, so again, this window here, the compilation window, represents what you see is what you get. So a preview, if you would, of the map before you download it. So again, we call it compilation window because you can actually add in and get a preview of the content before you download it. Let me zoom to see the whole map on the screen. So let me go back here now to the map board window. And again, we've got these increased map area and decreased map areas. So for example, here, I can click on these. I'll just kind of do this. And you'll notice on the compilation window, you're zooming in and you're getting more detail on the map, right? And again, on the reverse, as I do that, you can see the other map responds to that. So again, these are handy little tools to kind of fine-tuning the amount of detail that you want to see on your map, again, before you download it. So that's kind of the distinction there. So once we've got the map defined, what I want to do now is focus a little bit more on the compilation window. So this is where you're probably going to spend most of your time. So now that we've got the map extent defined, I want to go in and make some changes. So in this particular case, I've started with this dark gray base map, and this is a raster image. And how I know it's a raster image is here, if I click on this button here, it says select base map. I get a list of other base maps that are available to me, and there's a small icon that indicates whether this base map is a vector map or a raster map. So on the very top of our list, you can see this kind of little icon. It looks like 4 little squares, little nodes, if you would, with selection handles. And any map that actually has that icon represents that that's a vector map. So if you were to use this map and download it, the content that would be represented in Illustrator are vector layers. And on the flip of that, if you scroll down here a little bit further, for example, I'm currently using this dark gray canvas, you'll notice it has a little thumbnail in the upper right corner that looks like a little series of pixels. And that represents an image or a raster base map. So you can kind of see the distinction here. So again, if I was to use this dark gray base map, it would come down as a single raster image inside of Photoshop or Illustrator. In this particular example, we've created 2 custom maps specifically for this application that use vector data. And that's these 2 that appear at the top here. There's a vector street map, and then there's a natural earth one. I'll just show you the natural earth one really quickly. At this level of detail, there's actually not much there. So this particular map is actually good for like country or state level detail, not so good when you're actually zoomed into like a city or a neighborhood or something to that level. So in this particular case, my recommendation is, if you really question this would be the best one to go with in most cases. It's pretty detailed. It can go down to have building footprints, it'll have roads, and it'll also work for when you're zoomed out at a country or state level as well. It actually works well in most situations. So if you're looking for a vector map that you want to stylize or change in terms of base data, roads and buildings and rivers and so on and so forth, my recommendation is to use this vector street map base map in terms of a starting point to build your map on top of. So that's a little bit about those layers. So now what I want to do is I want to add some additional content. So what I want to show first is I want to bring in some data. So this is an Excel document. I just quickly wanted to show this. It has store location, it has a name, it has a category, it has an address, a city, state, a zip, and there's some other information in here as well. And what I can do is, because this has a series of columns that are actually geographic in the sense that it has an address and a zip code and a state, we can actually use this file and bring that in as content into the application. This is similar to, if you remember back to the demonstration that Sarah did at Max, it's a very similar workflow to this. This is, again, a little bit more detailed data, but I just wanted to show that's what I'm going to load in, and this is kind of the format. It's just a simple Excel document that has a series of columns that we can use to put these locations on a map. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to load in that document. So here in the compilation window, your friend is really this button here. It's the one that looks like the layers icon. It has a series of layers, and then there's a little plus button. And the plus button means you can add data. So if I click, I get a series of options. And in this particular case, I want to add that data from that local Excel file. So that's add layer from file. So that's at the very bottom. So if I click this, it'll bring me up a file dialog, and this one here, major retail sample 1 CSV, that's the document we were just looking at. So I just simply open that document. And as soon as you do that, again, because that Excel document had a series of columns that had geographic information, we can position those on the map. So you see those purple dots now on the map. So what I wanted to do now is show a couple of little workflows. This is a little bit of the overlap from what Sarah showed in her demonstration, but I want to change and show a few different options. So the first thing I'm going to do in here is you can expand this layer, and you can see the default symbol. It's just this purple symbol. But what I want to do is actually make a unique symbol for each category or each unique store name. So how I can do that is there's the change style. It looks like a painter's palette. If you click on that, let me make this a little bit bigger here. You've got some options of how you want to symbolize this information. So I'm going to change it from show location only to I want to display the unique symbols based on the name of the store. So I'm going to use, in my Excel document, that column in the Excel was called display name. And so now you can see that the colors have changed a little bit. And if you want to get a little more detailed, you can see the little green checkbox here. That's this type of symbol that you're using. If you click the options, you can drill in and get some more details here. You can start to see the individual values. So we've got Firestone, you've got Dollar Tree, so on and so forth. And you can see the list down here. What I wanted to note is down here at the bottom, you have this other category, and you'll notice that there's 47 in it. And then there's a whole bunch of other store names listed below that. And you'll notice this little blue arrow. Essentially what we do is we try to not overwhelm the map with too many different colors and symbols, but you can actually add those and push those out as unique symbols. And if you want to do that, you click this double arrow here. So all those other, the more or less the miscellaneous category, you can push those all out, and you'll get all your unique symbols here. And it'll give you a count of the features over this map extent. So now all the symbols are available to you here. The other thing you can do is you can change how that data is being represented. Up here, there's a change symbol style. And how I like to think about this is you're not really doing what I would call the design work in terms of the aesthetic that you would do in Illustrator. Really, this is more of a data visualization task, just a way to easily represent these symbols before you do the detailed design work inside of Illustrator. But for example, I want to make these symbols bigger so you guys can see them. So I'm just going to go in here and change symbol, and I'm going to keep them in circles. I'm just going to make them big so you can actually see them a little bit easier on the screen. So now you can see them here, and that's really all I wanted to do at this point. So here, now again, in this list, you can see all the unique stores with their unique symbols at this point. So I'm going to collapse that for now. And what I want to do is show another workflow that we actually didn't show at Max. So this is some new stuff that we didn't highlight. So in this particular example, I have these really generic symbols. They're not really intuitive. And what I want to do is I have an existing symbol library set up in Illustrator that I actually want to use. So I'm going to open this document. It's quite large. This was actually provided to us by one of our customers. So this is nothing that we've created. This is something that they've created, and we've been able to use it on their for testing and so on and so forth. So in this example here, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with symbol libraries and swatches and brushes, but essentially, I'm going to open up my symbols library here, and if you can see that, here there are quite a few symbols, and these are a series of symbol libraries for all the unique logos for the stores in this particular example. So we've got 99-cent store, we've got A&W, we've got AAA, AT&T, and kind of the list goes on and on and on and on. So again, we already have an Adobe symbol library set up, and what I want to do is essentially use these already predefined symbols in my map, and I'll show you how to do that now. So let me close this, and let me go back to the extension. Let me move this guy over a little bit so we can see it again. So how I'm going to do that is, now that I've got the unique symbol name set up here, so we've got Firestone, Dollar Tree, as I mentioned here, what you maybe have noticed is in the symbol library, the names of the symbols in the symbol library now match these names here. So essentially what we're going to do is do a find and replace, but I have to set that up. So over here back in the mapboard dialog, if I go over here to the options panel, if I click on that and I go into settings, what I can do is under libraries, I have the ability to essentially have the extension point to that custom symbol library that I just showed. So that symbol library is in an Illustrator document. And essentially I'm just pointing to that logos symbol library Illustrator document. The other thing you'll note is you can do that for symbols, you can do that for brushes, and you can do that for swatches. In this particular example, I'm just going to do the symbols, but you could actually have this process work for, symbols, brushes, and swatches. So from a mapping point of view, we would think of it almost like points, lines, and polygons. So once I have that referenced here, the other thing I want to do is we have another dialog that we call processes. And you can open that up here. And let me bring this one down here a little bit. There are a number of processes, and what a process is once the map is being downloaded, this extra process, if you would, can execute. And so these are optional operations that can happen. So in this particular example, we already have this use custom symbols set up. So that one's already checked on. I can choose to execute it at any point. And again, what it says here is it's going to replace the default symbol that's in the map with any matching symbol names that it can find in the symbol library that you've referenced in the settings, which is exactly what we want to do. So I'm not going to run it at this point. I'm going to actually let that apply when I download. Because this is checked on, these processes, anything that is checked on will execute automatically when the map is downloaded. So that's what I want to do in this case. So now that I've got the process set up, let me click the download button and have the map show up. So let me click this. And so this will take, I think it's about 30 seconds to a minute. So maybe this is a good point to see if anyone has any questions or comments. I can unmute everyone and let me know if you guys have anything, or you can type in the chat window, whatever you prefer. But I'll unmute you all now as this takes process. Any questions?
There's one question which says, how do you change projections?
Okay, good. I'll show you that actually in a minute. There's a step a little bit later on in the next demo I want to show that will use the same dialogue. So I'll address the projection question once I get to that point. So if you just hold on for a couple more minutes, we'll get to that. Any other questions?
So far, so good. Thank you.
All right, good. All right, so it's almost processed here. So one thing to note, I'll put you all on mute again. So you should see now here in a second or so the symbols will get replaced.
So as that is working, there was a question about, is there a way to have miles instead of kilometers?
Oh, okay. So the question is, I'm assuming that's on the scale bar. So if you want to have the scale bar have different units than kilometers, that's something that's not available currently, and that's something we are actively looking into. So yeah, not as of yet, but it's something that we have discussed. So potentially in a future update. So that's good. Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that we wanted to get out of this as well is ideas and feedback from you guys as well. We wanted to show you a little more technical details on the tool, but what we were also hoping to do, and I think I said that in the email, is your thoughts, ideas, what you like, what you don't like, and potential enhancements. So we're going through and doing our planning for our next release and our future releases. So if you guys have ideas or suggestions, yeah, we'd love to hear those. So you can share those throughout this presentation, or you can wait till the end as well. So this is done, and again, now what you can see here in the final map is you have all the vector artwork, right? All the text is editable text. The roads are all vectors. You can see me as I hover over the text. And again, you'll notice that now all those generic looking circles have been replaced with these very detailed vector symbols from the symbol library. And again, if you notice here in the layers panel in Illustrator, it all comes in very nice, very organized. You can see here this layer, major retail, that's all the data that came from that layer file. They're all in the unique symbols. So there's AMC on its own unique layer. And again, if you scroll down a little bit, all the roads and so on and so forth are on their symbols as well. So for example, you can see some of the building footprints. I'm just turning off and on there by the major freeway there, by the 17 that's running north-south. You can kind of see them turning off here. And again, all the roads, for example, are also on their own unique layers. So again, at this point, you've kind of, what I would say, you've transitioned from data visualization, data categorization, and now at this point, you can go in and do the design, the aesthetic work that you would normally do in Illustrator. So that's the first demo I wanted to show. Again, a little bit of overlap, hopefully a little more detail than what we showed during Max, so I wanted to give you a little more insight into the tools. And now what I want to do is show you a second workflow that highlights a few other things as well. So let me go back to our mapboard window. So that's the window that defines, again, your map extent. So a couple things. Notice now that I've downloaded this map, that you can see this little lock icon here. And really what that means is now that I've downloaded the map, I've essentially locked in the map extent and the level of detail. I can add additional layers if I choose to, but if I start edit mode, you'll notice that the lock is still there. I actually can't change this map extent anymore. So that's just a note. After you download it, you can't really change the geographic extent, because essentially the layers wouldn't line up, the detail would be misaligned. So that gets locked after the initial download. So just to let you note that as well, if you've seen that before, that's really what that means. So what I want to do here is, again, I'm going to get out of edit mode and zoom out a little bit. I wanted to show a couple different ways to add other maps as well. So in the previous example, I used the edit mode and I manually created my map extent. There's this other button over here, which is copy the extent and the content from an existing map. When I click that one, it opens up this Add Web Map dialog. And I wanted to highlight a couple things in here. Let me make the dialog a little bit bigger so we can see it. So we have a series of locations that you can pull to content from, so I wanted to highlight a little bit of those details here. So we have browse for an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS location. So the first one that gets loaded by default is Maps for a Creative Cloud. So what you see here in these thumbnails is a series of really just sample maps, maps that we, Sarah, myself, Madura, a couple other people on the team kind of went through and put together or found in ArcGIS Online, Esri's cloud, that we thought would be good samples. And just they are really just that. It's a way of looking at different types of maps, different type of data. They're not necessarily intended to be used as is, but just to kind of, again, show some examples of the types of data that's available and the types of maps that you can get. So you can see this list here, different types of maps. So some of them are just geographic, so the city of Paris, Madrid. Some of them are more thematic in the sense that they show a particular type of data. There's a political map, there's some demographic type information. And one of the things I mentioned earlier on, I've logged in as a paid user versus a free user. So this is really one of the biggest distinctions between a free complimentary user using your email address versus having an ArcGIS Online paid subscription. So you'll notice here in these thumbnails, there's this little lock icon in the upper right-hand corner. And what that is we call that premium content. So that's content that if for example, I click on it, there's a map I wanted to show in the next part of the demo. Where is it? Oh, it's not here. Oh, yeah, it's on. Oh, right here, this one here. So this map here, let me click on that one. So you'll notice this is median age of the United States. So this is a kind of a demographic type of map. And again, this is content that Esri is hosting in our cloud. And again, what I wanted to make note is in this particular case, I've logged in again with my paid account. And so again, it has a little lock icon. There's a note down here in the descriptions panel. It says restricted to complementary users, requires an ArcGIS on login. So again, that's one of the big distinctions between free versus paid is some of the content might not be available to you. The other thing I wanted to note here is in this description panel, it gives a little short summary of this data and the map and what it's used, who created it, and a few things like that. If you actually want to see more detail about any layer or any map that you might be using, down in this descriptions panel, there is this hyperlink that says full description, and I'm going to click on that. What that does is that's a link that points you back to the description, the full description of that map or that layer. So for example, this map here is 2017 median age in the United States. It shows who created it. This one was created by us. It tells you how many people have used it. It's a much more detailed description. It talks about the data, where it came from, very, very detailed. So again, and you can see all that information here. So if you're curious, if you see a thumbnail and you're curious about the layer, who created it, how popular it is it really going to be useful for my map? Again, what you can simply do is, again, down in the description, highlight the map, click the thumbnail, and again, down in the description panel, you can see this full description link, and you can click on that and you can get some more details about that. So in this case, I'm going to use this map. I'm going to load it. So if I click that map, again, what it does is this map has already been saved. It's been hosted in the ArcGIS Online cloud. It loads the extent. You can kind of see it here. This one happens to be, the default extent happens to be over Palm Springs. Again, you'll notice that it puts me right in edit mode. I can modify this again. I can change the extent. I can change the zoom level, all those details, just as we did before. So this is kind of almost like a shortcut to where we were before based on someone already pre-creating this map. One of the things I wanted to also mention is if you are in a company or an organization that has maybe another team that uses Esri technology, a GIS team, for example, that's using Esri technology, is using ArcGIS Online, and you need to get information from them, so maybe someone's created a map or created a layer, the easiest way for them to share that information with you in this extension, again, you can browse these locations here through this, but the easiest thing to do is if they want to share a specific map or a specific layer with you is to use this option here. So I click this radio button, it says enter an ArcGIS Online item URL. So what they can do is if they've already created a map, each layer in the ArcGIS Online system has a unique URL. So all they would need to do is essentially send you that URL in an email or whatever, and you can just literally copy and paste that URL and put it in here. So that way you don't have to browse for content. So again, that's just an easy way, is if you have, again, another team, a coworker that already is using Esri technology in another capacity, that's an easy way for them to share that content with you using this application just by simply putting in that content URL into this dialog instead of browsing. So I just wanted to highlight that. Forgot to show that earlier. Okay. So I have 15 minutes left, so I'll go through this one a little bit more quickly. So at this point, I'm going to open up this map. And again, I wanted to show a couple things here. Again, I'm going to position my dialog, my windows, so I can see them a little bit more. Shrink this one up a little bit. And what I can do here is this map has some layers in it that I don't want or I don't need. So it has some outlines. I don't care about these outlines, so I'm going to get rid of that. I can delete this layer. I can delete this layer. All I'm interested in is the different categories of the median age over Palm Springs. One of the things I wanted to do here is, in this case, I'm going to pick a different base map. I'm going to use this image background. So let me switch that out. And then what I want to do is I actually want to change the transparency of the vectors that are sitting on top of that base map. So again, go back into the change symbols, click options. You'll notice down here there's a transparency, so I can change that. So the transparency that I set here, that gets translated into opacity in Illustrator or Photoshop. So anything that I set here gets passed all the way through into Illustrator as well. So again, just a really quick sample here. Then what I want to do is I want to add some additional layers to this as well. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click, again, the add data to my compilation window. In this case, again, what we showed earlier is we showed add from file here at the bottom. I want to do an add from layers at this point. So again, showing off some of the content that you have access to. So again, quickly here, I'm adding layers. Again, you'll see these maps for Creative Cloud in this folder location. Again, these are just samples that we put together that we thought would be useful. So for example, here, there's maybe I want to show US freeways. I can add that. That shows up as a big red line going through the center of Palm Springs. And what you can also do is you can search, you can type in search, and you can filter your content based on vector or raster. So for example, in this case, I'm in Illustrator. Maybe I just only want to see my vector layers, so I can do that way as well. So the other thing I wanted to highlight is if you click on this, browse from the ArcGIS Online location, you'll get another series of folders. So this is where I want to highlight again the distinction between a free complimentary user and a paid user. So as a complimentary user, you don't have this node called My Organization. So again, that's if you are in an ArcGIS Online organization. Again, maybe there's a series of team members working on information. This is essentially a folder, a way of collaborating and sharing data. As a free user, you don't have access to that, so you won't see that node. But you will have access to these other nodes here. And so again, these are, think of them as folders inside of the Esri cloud that have geographic content layers that you can add to your map. A great one to look at is the Living Atlas of the World. That's broken down even further. So for example, you've got demographic information, transportation, urban systems, so on and so forth. So in this example here, I'm going to maybe look for some additional transportation. You can kind of see here, there's railroads and so on and so forth. Again, there's some premium content here, roads. I can bring that one in. So just get a little more detail on my map. And again, you can scroll through this list, or again, you can type in. And again, if you search ArcGIS Online is kind of the shared community. So in addition to Esri contributed content, business partners contributed content, users' content is up there as well. So any content that a user has shared publicly is available under this ArcGIS Online node. So if you click on that, you'll essentially get a whole list of data that the Esri community has shared publicly that is that you guys can use for your maps as well. So I just wanted to highlight some of that content options as well. And again, the description is full down here. So yeah, if you're looking for different information, this is from the Netherlands. So you can pull in information from anywhere. So one of the last ways to add data that I wanted to highlight is, if I go back here, is maybe you can't find the data that you're looking for and you want to more or less create it interactively, or not interactively I should say, but more based on location. So this is a way of doing that. We call it places. Let me move it over here to the side. So let's say, for example, I want to type in, maybe there's a specific address, a particular location I want. I can type in a street address, I can type in a zip code, I can type in a lat long, I can do that here. In this particular example, maybe I want to just search for a type of a retail location. So in this case, I want to look for all the Starbucks. So I can just start typing in Starbucks, and as you hover over these, you should start to see some of them show up in the map. So here, for example, I've typed in Starbucks, I click enter, you can see the list of returned Starbucks. If I hover over each one of these, you can start to see them highlight in the map. And then what I can do is I can add individual ones if I choose to do that here. So here you get a list. So in this case, if maybe I want all the Starbucks on the map, I can click add all. They get added to my map. And what I want to do in this case now is maybe I want to do something similar to what I did before, where I wanted to replace the locations with a specific symbol library. So I'm going to set it up the very same way I did before. So in this case right now, these places which represent Starbucks are with this really generic blue symbol. What I'm going to do is going to change that style. Go in here, and I'm going to change it to match address, and that will give me the name. Again, I'm going to go in here and just make it bigger so you can see it. So now we can see the big red dots. You can see here under the expanded layer, it's now called Starbucks. And what I can also do is maybe I want to label these restaurants or these stores as well. So I can go in here, there's a little label function. I can click in here, I can say label these features. In this case, it's bringing up the name of the restaurant and the address. I don't want that. I've got some options. Here I'm just going to say address, match address, which happens to be the name. And again, now I'm good to go. At this point, I'm going to click download. This one will take a little bit longer. What I forgot to do, which I apologize for, is someone asked the question earlier about how you change the projection. And I meant to do that before I downloaded this map, but as it's downloading, I can show it after. It's under this settings dialog, and let me try opening it now if it'll let me. Yeah, so under the settings dialog, what I wanted to show was two things. One is because I had an imagery base map in this map, I actually wanted to increase the DPI. I wanted to increase it from 96, which is the default, to 300. And I wanted to do that for two reasons. One, just to show you can do it and where it is. That is, again, one of the options that is not available to a complementary user. The default is 96. So if you're using any raster imagery, it's always going to come down as 96 DPI. The other thing that you'll note in this dialog is the projection option. So once the process dialog over here, map projection. So you can actually type in a map projection and change that here as well. A note about both of these settings, the DPI and the projection of the map. Again, just like I showed earlier, once you download the map becomes locked. Projection is one of those reasons why the map gets locked after download. We don't allow you to change the projection. So if you want to change the projection, change it before you download. So you can just type in a projection, for example, here. You can pick from the list, set that projection, and then download it. Once it's downloaded, you can't change the projection after. So I think says we're successfully done here. And here's our map. So again, really quickly, again, you'll notice the Starbucks logos and again, all the other vector content that's sitting here on top that you can then modify and change. And that's really what we wanted to show. Ran a little bit longer than I expected, but we do have a few minutes left for any questions or comments. So again, feel free to put them in the chat window, but I'm also going to unmute you all as well, because again, we'd love to hear your questions or feedback or enhancement ideas as well at this point. So I'll unmute everyone. And we've got a few minutes, so fire away if anyone has questions, comments, or suggestions.
So as we're waiting for some questions, there were some things that came up earlier. I answered some of them on the chat window, but I think it's useful to talk about. One of the questions was, is there a way to input custom symbols manually? So the idea is, can you drag and drop symbols as needed onto the map? What Clint showed is sort of a runtime process, a runtime workflow, where when the map is downloading, you can use a symbol library and have the download automatically update when the symbol library is referenced. The same workflow can also be run post-process. So if you download a map with symbols that you want to use, that you want to replace later, you can just go into that processes window and then run that process, and it'll just work on your Illustrator file. The other thing I want to point out is once the map is downloaded, it's just a pure Illustrator file with map artwork. So you can then work with your symbols, and you can then work with these features as you would normally with your symbol workflows. Does that help answer the question? Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. That was a really good question. There was also another question about the data types from ArcGIS Online that are supported, or the maps that are supported. And there was a really good example here about the current wildfire situation in Los Angeles. That is, there's a web map that Esri has put out that shows all the active wildfires. Now, when you load that web map into our extension, the extent is drawn, but not all the content is drawn, because there are some layer types in that web map that is currently not supported. But I think this is a good feedback where we can use this as something to work towards and expand our coverage of the different data types that the online maps support. So I don't know if you want to add to that anymore.
Yeah, so I guess the quick answer is, we don't support all the options that are available in the what we call, Esri calls the web map specification. We're continuing to expand that. Some of the limitations happen to be also is how the creator and publisher of that map created the data. So one common example is if there's an option when they publish what we call publish a map, or they share a map with ArcGIS Online, is the option to what we call have query enabled. So for example, if that option when they publish the map is disabled, we cannot access that layer. There is some documentation that we actually have, and I could share that out after this, that kind of lists some of those details. But again, overall, what we are trying to do, and we're going to continue to expand this, is essentially support more features, more content in terms of what is available in an ArcGIS web map, but also from the community as well. So for example, we are actively working on the ability to load KML files as well. So we're continuing to look at other types of data and other types of maps and other types of features that we can load. So if there's a specific things or specific priority, again, you can send us an email or just let us know. But yeah, that's something we are actively working
on. So there's another follow-up question from Chelsea about if I wanted to build multiple map layers for a specific area, do we build it in one map, or do we need to create multiple files? For example, the demographic housing cost, the proximity to a city, or some other such things. You can actually continue to add multiple layers in the same map board. As in the examples Clint showed, he added just the CSV file, but you can keep going back to that map board and keep adding more content as needed.
So I'm just showing that briefly now. So let's say I'm just picking something kind of here at random. U.S. poverty and crime. That's Palm Springs. So I don't know how much poverty and crime there is, but I'm going to load that layer here. So you can see it now. It just showed up. It's pretty obvious. It's very much pink color. What I can choose now is, as long as my current Illustrator document is open, I can still add content to this map. Now, I've already downloaded all the other layers, so what I can do is, maybe I don't want the Starbucks locations anymore. I want this poverty one I just added. I don't care about this one. Just quickly do this. I don't care about that one anymore. I've got the roads already. I'm going to delete that. Freeways I've already added. The median age I've already got in my Illustrator document, and I've already got an image map, so I'm going to get rid of that too. So now I've just got this new layer. I can still synchronize this layer as well. And again, this is the reason why the map becomes locked because you can go in after the fact, again, in the same Illustrator document, same, as long as Illustrator is open, I can go in and add additional content after the fact as well. And it'll get synchronized and added as a new layer as well. So maybe, hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, we got an awesome on that.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. There's another question about when somebody shares a URL and we add that to the mapboard window, are we able to change the area it covers in the mapboard window after we add it using the URL?
Yes. Yes, yeah, so you can do that. So as I mentioned before, as this is loading here, and I think we're almost out of time here, but I'll see if I can do it really quickly here as this one downloads. It's almost done here. All right, cool. So that one's done. So again, just to kind of repeat, now that new layer is on top, just to quickly show the existing map is still below it. So again, that's up to you in terms of use your design skills now. How are you going to show all that content? That's kind of an Illustrator workflow at this point, but the data is there. It's all lined up based on that. So the question was, if I have a URL, so let me go back over here to our mapboard window. And let me see if let me grab a URL really quickly, if I can do this. Yep, there we go. So let me I'm going to kind of reverse engineer this to some degree. So this is a map example. Again, this is Eastern United States. This is something we put together as a sample. But again, here's this URL, right? It has this long kind of code. So again, what we can do is simply take this code. I just copied it. And now let me go back in here. I'm going to use that URL. So I'm going to paste that URL in. Just hit enter. We get the map, right? So again, just like you normally do, I'm going to click the add button. Again, here's the map extent, and you're right back in where we were before. You're in edit mode. So again, I can go in and I can change the scale. I can reposition this. I can do whatever I want with it. So it's really just a quick way. So yeah, so maybe someone on the GIS team has created something, but you as the designer want to tweak that a little bit. You've got full control over to do that. And again, this is a pretty detailed map. Again, this is using this natural earth map that I talked about earlier. So again, this one's a little bit better for scales that are more country or state based. So again, this is a pretty detailed map here over the Eastern United States. That's again, so yeah, so that should answer that question. Can I modify the map after I load the URL?
So we got a couple more questions and then we'll probably close out. But I wanted to point out before we close out is that we do have a blog or a community area, and I'll paste the URL in here for everyone. This is a great place to keep the chat going on. You know, you're welcome to add comments and add suggestions to our community page. Also, go to maybe the Adobe site, the add-on site, and add comments there. We'll try and get back to you on that. But before we close, there were a couple of more questions. Is there a black and white raster relief imagery? So there are a couple of layers hosted in ArcGIS Online. There is a terrain layer. There's also a hillshade layer that you might want to explore to see if that suits your needs. And Clint is showing them right now.
Yeah, so that would be, so again, I'm in the compilation. I've clicked the add layers. Again, that would probably be a raster layer. So I'm going to switch to raster. And so yeah, there's a couple of things in here. We've got, again, we put some samples under this node. You can see the terrain. Again, it's also premium, so you'll note that. But if you, for example, search, if you go down to the Living Atlas, oh, there's an imagery. Here's a good one. If you go under Living Atlas imagery, there's a bunch of other ones, and you'll notice that they don't have the lock. So this is not premium content. So there's a world imagery. There's a whole bunch of other ones in here as well. So yeah, you can kind of cruise around, and again, if you can't find stuff there, you could also search for ArcGIS Online. Maybe someone's contributed something. So again, if you want to type in terrain or hillshade or something to that effect, you might be able to find something as well. Yeah, so maybe, yeah, I think it would be under imagery. But I quickly can't see anything from a hillshade point of view, but I know there are ones, but I can't seem to find it at this point. But.
So the last question here that we still haven't answered is, how do you make a chloroplet map from your own data? if I had my own data for, let's say, the census tract.
Mhm.
And I'm curious about what format that data is in, because the answer might change depending upon what format the data is in. So what is the format for the data that you have? And if you want to jump on the phone, oh, it's a shapefile or a CSV.
Okay.
So if it's a shapefile, it's the same add workflow that Clint showed with the CSV.
So you would do something like this. You would just click the add, and again, you're going to add from file. Again, you can add. Currently, we support CSV, text files, and shape files. I don't happen to have a shape file on me. I don't think, but
it's the same workflow.
It's the same workflow, yeah.
Where once you add it, you have that color palette, that the symbology editor from where you can go in and pick an attribute from your shapefile and CSV to build a choropleth map. So if you add some data.
So in this case, again, it's points. But again, if you had loaded a shapefile that has polygons, if you want to make a choropleth, how you would do is you go to the change style dialog here, and you would pick, for example, again, I don't know if I have anything. I don't have anything that has like a magnitude field. So you need something that has some sort of integer or number range. So you would pick your number. Again, if you're doing a choropleth, let's say it's population or whatever it happens to be. So whatever that field would be, you would pick that here. And again, this is not a great example because there's nothing that has a magnitude field. But in that case, you would pick that, and you'd get another option down here, and it would say symbolized by colors or size. And that way, you can then pick that up and do that. And so again, you're using the same dialog. Yeah, so you pick your number field here, you get another option here, and then you could click on that and play with the class breaks and so on and so forth to build that choropleth map.
There's one more question about, is there a template spreadsheet for adding locations?
In terms, I guess the question, I'm assuming what geographic fields would be needed in those documents? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay, yes, there is. And we can send that. I think Madura is making some notes. So we can send out some of these links. There is a document that describes what fields are being expected. And I can share that with you guys after this as well.
Yep. And I think we have referenced that through our documentation. So
yes.
we have our documentation online, and it's referenced through our documentation. It points you to a list of fields that should be in your CSV file, so that when you add that CSV to the extension, to the plugin, it can add it on the map. So if are there any additional questions? I don't see any more questions coming in. So thank you for joining in. Clint?
Yep, I was just here's the link. So again, if you just go to, this was the easy way to find it. So I'll end up with this. So let me just go back here and show you how I did that. So back here in the mapboard window, so again, that's the window that defines your map extent. If you click the help, it'll load our online help. We have documentation. We also have our YouTube channel. So some of this stuff is covered also in our YouTube channel. We've got a number of videos out there. But if you go to documentation, click on this hyperlink, it'll load our documentation. So this is our page here. If you just type in, for example, CSV, and then the first hit is add content to ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. Click on that. And then it talks about some of the details I just gave. It talked about the data types. So I think there was a question earlier about the types of data we add. So this describes a little bit of that. But if you go down here to CSV text and even shape files, but specifically about CSV and text, there's another hyperlink here. You click on that. And then it talks about, I think was the question earlier, what fields are supported. So it describes in more detail what fields would need to be set up and what they're expecting. So that gives you a little bit more documentation there as well.
I added the URL to the chat.
Cool.
So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. The community page we have on the Esri.com site is a really good place We also frequently update that with blogs and additional workflows. Something like this chloroplet question, I think, is a great question to write a blog on, perhaps. So maybe that's something we can look forward to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Oh, one last thing. If you have been using the application and you like it, if you wouldn't mind, you can go back to the Adobe add-on site and give us a positive review as well. That would be great. But yeah, and again, if you need to reach out to us at any point, feel free to do that. Thanks for calling in, and enjoy the rest of your day.